Mass timber is unique in that it uses historically low-value timber to create really high-value products. We have been really the forefront of the mass timber innovations in the United States, here in Oregon, with manufacturing, with design, with architecture, with construction.
The vision for the future is about bringing a broad coalition together to create an advanced manufacturing site for wood products here in Oregon, beginning here on site with prototyping of mass timber housing manufacturing, which would happen likely right over here in this facility.
What we'd love to do here on the T2 site is prototype these modules in a way that can actually put housing in the community at the same time. We have a housing crisis that's been building for decades.
Corvallis, Salem, Eugene, and obviously the city of Portland are cities that have experienced a tremendous growth on new talent that comes to the cities. But also with that, you will experience, housing prices going up. We see thousands of people that sleep on the streets every single night.
It's time to get people into housing that they can afford, and it's time to revitalize our communities.
This product is going to open that door, and it's going to fill that gap, providing housing that is deployable almost immediately for families that need it the most.
To help alleviate some of the pressure we're seeing on housing markets and a shortage of housing in the region.
And we're really, really excited to partner with the port as well as other players to bring this enterprise to life.
And the reason that it's so perfect here is because we're in an urban location, we're at a nexus of a lot of these amazing industries. We can really take advantage of all of the industries along the I-5 corridor and build a very regional supply chain that utilizes economies throughout the state, throughout the region.
Our hope is that we're also going to connect to the federal government effort around Build Back Better, and the idea that coming out of the pandemic and this economic dislocation, we'll use federal investment to create new opportunities for people to get these high-paying jobs, and also to focus on issues like equity and advanced workforce development.
What I see is the opportunity to take climate solutions and housing solutions and have them be the same thing. So we can all work together to create a product that is actually healing our climate, at the same time get people into housing and make our communities more beautiful.
So it is a win-win situation for absolutely everyone.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Vineyard, the Market Executive for Bank of America's Global Commercial Banking Group. I am also the Board Chair for Oregon Business and Industry. And Oregon Business and Industry is the state affiliate for the National Association of Manufacturers. This year, OBI and OBC have partnered to create an agenda on how to strengthen manufacturing in our state. That agenda is on the screen behind me. We believe that manufacturing is absolutely essential to building a shared prosperity for everyone in Oregon. The reasons are simple. Manufacturing pays a premium compared to other sectors. Manufacturing employs a higher percentage of BIPOC Oregonians than other sectors. Manufacturing often doesn't require a four-year degree. And manufacturing can generate significant public revenue. Just a 10% increase in manufacturing output can create roughly $800 million in annual state and local tax revenues. Not to mention, roughly 23,000 direct manufacturing jobs could be created, and an additional 66,000 jobs that would be needed to support that economic growth. Today, we're going to talk about what it's going to take to strengthen manufacturing in Oregon, and even capitalize on opportunities to grow it. I have the privilege of moderating our discussion with some great Oregon business leaders. They each have firsthand knowledge of the challenges and opportunities that Oregon faces in manufacturing. So please let me introduce you. First is Carla Chambers. Carla is the co-founder of Stallbush Island Farms, a grower and processor of individually quick frozen fruits, vegetables, and grains. She has been a longtime advocate for the agricultural industry in our state and recently joined the State Board of Forestry. Carla is also a 2020 OBI Oregon Visionary Award recipient. Next is Alicia Chapman. Alicia is the owner and CEO of Willamette Technical Fabricators. Previously, she led the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center's research projects, worked as an NSF-funded sustainability researcher at PSU, and led supply chain and workforce development programs for the U.S. Agency for International Development. We also have with us Seth Sherry. Seth is the Economic Development Manager for the City of Albany and is also the President of the Oregon Economic Development Association. Seth has a background in international agricultural development and a master's degree in public policy. So let's get started. I'd like to ask each of you to give us an overview of your business, discuss some of the unique challenges that you're seeing, and then how are these challenges impacting not only your business, but also the greater community? Carla, let's start with you.
Thank you, Karen. So my husband and I are co-owners of Stallbush Island Farms in Corvallis, Oregon. And we started this company when we were 24 and 25 years old, just a couple years ago. Actually, it's 37 years ago and 888 payrolls ago. Somehow you remember that as a business owner. We are certified organic and certified sustainable farmers and processors. We farm in 4 counties. And I really want to thank my family and our workers because the last 18 months have been hard. And we never shut down. We kept farming, we kept producing food, and I'm really proud of them. There was no playbook for that, and I know the governors around the country, and there was no playbook for any of us, and so I'm just really appreciative of our management team and our family. We farm 5,000 acres of irrigated ground, produce over 20 crops. We work with 35 outside growers who also grow organic and sustainable crops for us. We have 3 labels. You might know us under our Stallbush frozen brown bag label, our Farmers Market organic pumpkin label, and Nummy Tum Tums pet food. And we ship around the world. We export to 30 countries. We started with 2 employees. Today we have 450 year-round employees. So we are job creators. We're one of those businesses that could be net zero carbon, and we work toward that every day. I think of myself as an OSU Beaver, an economist, and I spent almost 20 years with the Federal Reserve, and I enjoy thinking about monetary policy every day.
Do you want to discuss any of the challenges in your business?
So challenges, I would put inflation as our #1 challenge. And I know your panel's going to talk about that today, but I checked with Goldman Sachs last Friday, and they project inflation at 5.1% CPI for 2022. But I want to tell you what's happening in Oregon manufacturing and in food processing. Our raw product costs have increased 32% this year. Packaging up 33%. I bring in a truckload of buckets. Each truckload is $5,500 more per truckload. Our plant labor is up 26%. Our raw product freight is up 18%. Our diesel is $1.11 more a gallon than this day last year, which is $10,000 for every tanker I bring in. Our outbound freight to New York, and this is really important because we have a small population base in Oregon, is a 66% increase, or $3,720 per truckload more to get to our East Coast markets. To get to Auckland, New Zealand, it's 54% more. So I think while you hear 5%, 6% inflation, the real costs to these manufacturers and 3 of our top 4 industries in Oregon, technology, forest products, food products, and agriculture, our cost structures, we haven't seen anything like this in 30 years. And as I shared with Senator Wyden a minute ago, I can only use these incentives if we're profitable and we can maintain a business environment that is sustainable. That far and away, we'll talk about labor in a bit, but that far and away is our biggest challenge today.
Thanks, Carla. Alicia, how about you?
So Willamette Technical Fabricators is a structural metal manufacturing and machining company. We have facilities in Portland and Clackamas. We specialize in custom, complex infrastructure and transportation projects like bridges, locks, and dams. We also do some aerospace and marine work. Our customers are government agencies like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and private partners across the U.S., but primarily in the Pacific Northwest. So some challenges. On top of the supply chain disruptions that's impacting everyone, a big challenge for us this year has been surging material costs, especially for steel, and a lack of availability from local and domestic suppliers. So, Karen, it would always be my strong preference to buy local whenever I can and support businesses I know I can trust, keep more wealth in Oregon, and reduce carbon emissions shipping heavy materials long distance. But I think it's going to take more support from government to grow domestic supply chains and boost the competitiveness of industries like U.S. Steel so I can continue to buy American and stay competitive myself.
Thanks, Alicia. Seth, what are you seeing?
Well, since Carla got an ovation for mentioning she was a beaver, I'll say I have 2 degrees from there, twice over, so start with that. Well, I'll just say a quick note about what I do. I have 2 roles here as a practitioner in economic development, but also as the president of the Oregon Economic Development Association. So just a quick word on OEDA, if I might. It represents over 150 members from around the state, both ports, not both, but ports, cities, chambers, other municipalities, destination marketing organizations, chambers, and utilities. And OEDA members work on the front line of Oregon's economy day in and day out to attract and retain businesses across key sectors and support regional collaboration around economic development. Now, with respect to the profession of economic development specifically, I don't know how unique this challenge is, but it's certainly pertinent given the unique situation that our friends here on this panel have noted today. We are faced constantly with the need to educate and remind everybody in our community, including policymakers, that traded sector jobs drive our economy. Unless we're in a tourism-based economy bringing new dollars in, traded sector means we're selling our goods and wares outside of the community and bringing new dollars in. And as important as local business is, when we circulate dollars, there's leakage that happens over time. And unless we're infusing new dollars into our community through trade sector business, we're not vital and we're effectively dying over time. And so one of the roles that economic developers play is frequently educating or trying to educate and remind of the immense challenge it is to retain our traded sector businesses so they can be vibrant and keep our communities vibrant.
Thanks, Seth. Well, we talked about challenges. Now let's talk about opportunities. The business plan sees significant opportunities for manufacturing growth, in particular coming from the federal infrastructure package that recently passed, the clean energy proposals that are a part of the Build Back Better Act, and from accelerating reshoring. Alicia and then Carla, can you reflect on the opportunities you see in your businesses from the federal agenda?
Sure. At Willamette Technical Fabricators, we are very excited about the bipartisan infrastructure framework and the much needed funding in this bill to expand and rebuild critical U.S. infrastructure. There are huge opportunities in this bill for us. I'm also cautiously optimistic about the proposed green energy investments in the Build Back Better Act. At our company, we've been talking about some really innovative new projects like battery-powered rail cars that are going to bring electric vehicles to mass transit, and pump storage hydropower to help deal with some of the energy transmission challenges from renewable resources like wind and solar. These are the kind of projects that are absolutely going to require the level of funding in the Build Back Better Act to come to fruition. So I urge our legislators and our local leadership to continue to support funding for infrastructure and green energy. I say I'm cautiously optimistic because of my concern that the majority of this, it's the same handful of massive government contractors that are going to disproportionately benefit. So we also need help making sure that a significant portion of public funding goes to creating jobs and creating work for small businesses like Willamette Technical Fabricators that Carla just informed me account for 85% of Oregon businesses and 2/3 of jobs nationwide.
Wow. Carla?
So before I talk about the opportunities, I'd just like to emphasize why local manufacturing, really matters. So the U of O did a study on our business and put a 13x multiplier on us. And my biggest competitor, our whole career as a company owned by General Foods out of the Midwest. And they import everything. And we just talked about the need to do that to stay competitive. I could run their business model with 3 people. But it's essential to create this 13x multiplier. We have 6,000 plus vendors that support our business, 450 year-round employees. For every dollar we generate in sales, we generate $13 in our economy. We work with local growers. That's creating new wealth, new capital, and the opportunity is great. We're not a leveraged company. We know how to make investments. We know how to invest in green energy. We brought the first GPS satellite-guided tractors out of Europe. We've got robots that we want to bring in for weeding, but the lead time is 3 years. We know how to do this. We know how to do that capital labor substitution when labor's not available. But I think that there's great demand for food. Oregon and the Willamette Valley, we grow over 220 agricultural crops. We're family-run businesses. But the most important part of that opportunity is we will only create those investments and invest capital where we've got a business environment that makes sense to invest capital into.
Thanks, Carla. Seth, from an economic development standpoint, where do you see some opportunities?
I think you asked about opportunities and challenges, and so let me highlight a challenge and attach some opportunity to that, if that's okay. It may come as a shock, and I hope it does, and I hope it puts a little pit in our stomachs here to note that we regularly, as economic developers, are turning away expansion and recruitment opportunities for existing and new firms for a lack of developable land. And this isn't land that can be developed within a 1-year timeline. We're talking about multiple years. Effectively, what's happened is much of the low-hanging fruit within our urban growth boundaries has been taken. And so what remains has some significant infrastructure needs. It may be encumbered by wetlands or other conditional factors, brownfields, floodplains, and so forth. And the cost or regulatory burden to get those to be buildable is quite high. And I know that Albany is not unique in that, but I might just share a quick example. And I'll start by saying we need to be really blunt about our conflicting priorities in the state of Oregon. We have some aspirations around, we have great aspirations around affordable housing, great jobs, but those come in conflict at times with our land use policy that restricts where we can build. And that has a lot of benefits as well. I'm from Oregon and I appreciate farm and forest land as much as the next person. But as an example, we recently did an assessment of all buildable lands in the city of Albany. And of industrial and commercial sites, we have no sites over 15 acres that have less than a year horizon on buildability, if that's a word. I'll just make that up right now. And that means that there is significant cost to bring infrastructure to those properties or mitigate against wetlands that are encumbering those sites. And many of them have large amounts of wetlands on them. So let me just suggest a couple of options. We don't want to turn away more opportunities, both existing and future. Business Oregon, our state's economic development agency, a number of years ago came up with something called the Industrial Site Readiness Program. And this provides a 50% reimbursement to local municipalities for infrastructure-related mitigation to create buildable sites. That's essential. It hasn't been funded yet. And I would encourage our policymakers to take a good look at that, especially as we have an influx of federal stimulus dollars, to think about a way to fund that to help get us over that last mile to create buildable lands that are shovel-ready and have less lead time for developments. The second point I would make is trying to reduce our regulatory uncertainty around wetlands. And again, an example from my neck of the woods, Eco Northwest did a study on wetland impacts for development in 2007. And while wetlands mitigation might only add 5 to 6% of total site development cost, depending on how large that development is, the uncertainty around timelines associated and other things of dealing with those wetlands drives potential development away. And these are good developments, creating jobs that have a lasting impact in our community. And then related to that, I'll just add, the opportunity for a state-sponsored wetland credit bank is immense. Even if you can navigate the regulatory environment, then buying credits off-site to deal with impacted on-site wetlands is oftentimes an unknown whether there'll be credits available or not. And so having a large bank of available credits would be immensely helpful in reducing uncertainty for job-creating lands.
Thank you, Seth. Well, it seems like if we could increase manufacturing output, we could really create opportunities for manufacturing jobs. So the real question is, what's it going to take to seize on those opportunities? And you mentioned one of them. The business plan calls for a three-part approach that focuses on improving the business environment by addressing these bottlenecks, land being one of them, and so thank you for bringing that up. It also talks about investing to build our workforce pipeline and enabling innovation. So with land being one bottleneck, we have an equally important obstacle with labor and finding enough of it. Alicia, what's the issue here? What do you think we should do about it? And what should we do to make sure that the manufacturing workforce is more diverse?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm really passionate about this. I've been working with an amazing nonprofit organization, Oregon Tradeswomen. They have over 1,700 women right now, over half of whom are women of color, that are lined up waiting to do their programs, waiting to start careers in the trades. So the diverse workforce is out there. It's just a matter of reaching them. And I applaud all the efforts to rebrand manufacturing jobs as high skill, high tech, high wage. For the most part, I think that's working, especially when the person delivering that message is actually relatable to the target audience. But a few hours at a career fair or a manufacturing day cannot substitute for years of exposure through vocational programs or middle and high school shop classes. We need to get kids off their screens and working with their hands to realize if this is what they're actually passionate about and if a manufacturing career is actually going to be a good fit. And I hear this from my shop supervisors, from my engineers, from the educators that we partner with to try to find new recruits, and we just heard it from Senator Merkley a few minutes ago. We need to bring back shop class, and that means funding for schools.
Absolutely.
I also think we need more direct communication between businesses and educators. My business has been working very closely with several local trade programs to make sure that they're offering the relevant skills that we need to justify paying higher wages, which in turn helps them recruit more students. And competitive wages are key. We keep hearing it. I can't compete with Taco Bell management if I'm offering low wages at my manufacturing plant. But we also need to be offering the same comprehensive benefits for people in the shop as people in the office and give people flexibility so they can have a career and also have a family, especially women with kids in a pandemic. We're doing all of that at Willamette Technical Fabricators. Right now, 40% of our workforce is women and people of color, including me. And we can do better. But based on the policies and the strategies I just described, I only see that number going up as we continue to grow.
Thanks for your comments. Well, we hear a lot about the concerns businesses have with our state's business environment. There was a recent study done by OBI in conjunction with the State Tax Research Institute, and it found that the cumulative taxes for businesses rose 41% over the last couple of years. Also, regulation has been increasing, and there are costs associated with managing regulation. Both are impacting our competitiveness. Carla, what do you think this means for Oregon manufacturers?
Yep. I'm going to get to that. I want to make one comment on labor.
Thank you.
So last Friday, we had a jobs report come out, I think that was very shocking to the market. And I'd like our Oregon economists to dig deep on this because I think there's more to this story. I spent almost 20 years on the Federal Reserve Board, and if you look at the Wall Street Journal article on Saturday, you'll see if we're 3.6 million workers left that were employed prior to the pandemic that are still out of this workforce. But if you dig deep on that number, you will see that the labor force utilization rate of women is very high. But of those 3.6 million workers, 3.4 million of them are 55 years and older, and you're seeing record numbers of early retirement and natural retirement. So I think in the policy assumptions we make, I'm going to ask our economists to dig deep and make sure we get the right solutions because there's some interesting things happening there. And it's no surprise that we would miss a payroll. We were 340,000 jobs lower than consensus. We might see more of that if those numbers are true. Taxes and regulation, to our policymakers, I would just tell you, We haven't seen inflation like this in our careers. This is 30-year highs. When you look at the steel prices, all these input prices for manufacturing, I will tell you, none of my management team has managed through an environment like this. And so you have to expect severe margin and profit compression from these Oregon manufacturers. And you can't expand if you can't get a labor force or the automation to expand. So this summer we were about 100 workers short in our peak season for our business. So we're not sitting here with the pedal to the metal on how much more can we do, which has been our business focus. We have to allocate what can we do based on the labor that we can get and where can we stabilize profits. So a three thought process is really recognize the margin compression you're going to see with 3 of the 4 legs of Oregon's economy: forest products, agriculture, and food processing, and high tech, until we can get the capital labor substitution employed for where we can't get that labor force and be more efficient. And then we have to stabilize this business environment. I want to be sure you all read that OBI tax study. Given the various tax increases at the city, county, and the metro level, Portland businesses will pay 43% more in taxes due to enacted and proposed changes. This is a pretty rough environment to really drive up business costs. And, I'm at the end of my career, but I have thought about cash flow every day of my life, and all business owners do. And whenever I'm talking to groups, I ask them to draw 7 buckets. The 3 buckets on the left are federal taxes, state taxes, and estate taxes. And over our career, it's been about 51% federal and state, and it's about 51% estate tax. Then I draw 4 buckets on the right, and it's called capital expenditure, debt repayment, profit share, and inventory growth. I always tell the policymakers, you can take the tax rate to 100%. It's just math. But what you're doing is you're crowding out our ability to invest in capital expenditure and inventory growth and growth in our business. And when you see this margin compression, it's a really horrible time to drive up taxes. So I don't want to be unclear about that, because it's just math on what we do with our net income and our profits. Prudent business people right now will not take on more leverage in this inflationary environment until they see more certainty. And so I would just hope our policymakers would thoughtfully, really think about this inflationary environment we're dealing with.
Thanks, Carla. And you mentioned margin compression and taxes, but talk a little bit about the costs associated with increased regulation as well. Yep.
There's 42 federal, state, and local entities that regulate our business. And while any one regulation isn't the issue, the cumulative effect of this is substantial. And I would just ask you to go back to the OBI study, go back to that OBI tax study, 43% on taxes plus the regulatory burden. The last thing we need government doing right now is adding to this inflationary environment. We need to really be thoughtful about our cost structure and our ability for Oregon businesses to be competitive and competitive going forward. So I would just really call, when our legislature comes together, if you're really adding to that tax or regulatory environment, I am happy, I know all of us are happy, all of us in manufacturing, to show you our costs and what we're paying for basic, our top 10 items coming into our business, because it's just something that's I'd like to say we have all the answers for how we're going to deal with this. I'm here to tell you we don't. Our management teams, and please come up to me afterwards if you've got this figured out, because our management teams in Oregon haven't dealt with this kind of inflationary environment. So we're open for any feedback you can give us.
Thank you. Well, Seth, the incentive programs that are designed to attract and retain businesses in our state are constantly under threat. And with the other burdens that Carla is mentioning, I'd love to hear your comments about what this all means for Oregon, for our growth opportunities, and for economic development more generally.
That's a great question. Carla, your segue is actually pretty helpful here, because one of the ways we can mitigate against some of the costs you noted and the uncertainty around capital investment is to provide incentives that reduce some of that shock and reduce financing costs to make those investments to stay competitive in our current environment. It's probably no secret to most of you that Oregon plays by a different economic development playbook than does the rest of the country in many cases. I've been fortunate to take a lot of professional development courses and so forth and rub shoulders with folks all over the country who do this work, and it looks very different here. We're not lining up to give away land and millions of dollars in many cases. What we do have are a few targeted incentive programs that are common around the state. Primarily, we have enterprise zone benefits and the SIP program, the Strategic Innovation Program, or Investment Program, pardon me. We have very few tools, and these are critical to maintain these tools because of their role for both retaining local businesses who want to make investments. In traded sector, I'll remind you, these are good paying jobs with a great multiplier factor in our economy. This isn't fast food shops, which are great to have, but they don't have the same impact on our community. And we just can't lose these few tools that we have. If we do, that means we're losing businesses, and we're not losing them to other parts of the state, we're losing them to other states. That's just the reality of the situation. We have a very competitive neighbors all around us, Idaho, Utah, Nevada. It is a competitive environment out there, make no mistake about that. And I just make a couple of notes maybe on where some encouragement could happen around incentivizing or maybe retooling some of the programs we have. Our state's economic development agency, I mentioned to you, Business Oregon, and other state entities do have financing and grant programs that encourage economic development, both directly to businesses and sometimes to municipalities. What's been sometimes challenging in my experience is while there is capital available, oftentimes at favorable rates to encourage investment to businesses, it's oftentimes tied to job creation. And job creation is essential, but retaining existing jobs is a far more effective strategy in many cases because it allows you to take the skills that you've already invested in your employees, retool them to stay competitive with whatever way your business is going. And thinking closely about how the state provides financing and tying that maybe to metrics of competitiveness, of tooling up to stay competitive and take advantage of new opportunities in a changing environment is just as critical sometimes as adding new jobs alone. So I would encourage that. And then lastly, I made a note on this with respect to infrastructure, but to put it in reality in one circumstance, in my little community, Albany, which is growing rapidly at 55,000 people now, it's not a rural town anymore, slated to be nearly 70,000 in 20 years, our two largest industrial sites are not shovel ready. And there's about a $35 million price tag in today's dollar just to get those shovel ready. That's a tremendous burden for any community to take on without a bird in hand for development. But it's difficult for companies to sign up and purchase a property and want to develop there without a clear horizon on when they're developable. So I would strongly encourage, again, the state to look creatively, as has been mentioned a few times today, about making infrastructure dollars available and flexible at the local level so we can direct them towards specific projects that create revenue long term. And I'll just close by saying incentives are not giveaways, or they shouldn't be. They should be targeted tools that have a short-term cost for a long-term dividend that pays dividends for the entire state.
Thanks, Seth. Well, I'm going to move on to a slightly different topic. Something we've been hearing more and more about is Industry 4.0, or this idea of digital transformation of manufacturing. Alicia, can you tell us about Industry 4.0 and what it means for manufacturing? And what are we going to need to do to stay ahead of this wave rather than be crushed by it, especially if you're a small or medium-sized business like you have?
Sure. So, Karen, Industry 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution, is machine learning and full automation. It's way beyond CNC programming and robotics, which is really Industry 3.0, people programming computers instead of operating machines and tools manually. So I think it's semantic, but a lot of times when people talk about Industry 4.0 or smart factories, they really just mean bringing technology into production to make it safer, cleaner, more efficient. And as a small business owner, I get it. I'm hyper aware that for us to be successful, we need to be doing this. We need to find ways to keep innovating, keep evolving with the times. But I also need to find ways to bring technology into my shops without isolating the artisan tradespeople that have been doing things the quote-unquote old-fashioned way for decades. And they have a unique skill set that machines are never going to be able to replace. So for example, I can take a junior tradesperson and teach her robotic operating skills and pair her with a senior welder. And as a team, they're 5 times as efficient as the senior welder alone or the junior tradesperson who knows how to run the robot, but she doesn't yet know how to evaluate the quality of the welds that it's producing or troubleshoot if something goes wrong. So there's mentoring, there's reciprocal learning, and the robot can even do dangerous overhead welds that nobody wants to do by hand, which makes my workplace much safer. On top of being more efficient, I can win more contracts, I can pay everybody higher wages. That's great. But the robot is a huge initial investment, and I don't need tens of millions of dollars invested in R&D centers to tell me that I need this technology. I need grants and low interest loans so I can afford to put it in my facilities and train my workers how to use it in a production environment. You know, I worked at OMIC until I started Willamette Technical Fabricators, and I have 4 former OMIC board members on my staff, and we've all agreed it's never going to make sense for us to spend $318,000 a year to have access to proprietary research. If I had that kind of R&D budget, I'd use it to buy robots and train my team. So I think it's a great idea, and I'm really excited to work with OBC and work with our legislators to try to find solutions that actually target and support small and medium-sized businesses to be able to afford to do this. Because otherwise, Oregon manufacturing is not going to be able to continue to grow and keep up with the rest of the country and the rest of the world.
Thank you. Well, Carla, what comments can you make about digital transformation and what's happening in your industry that's really more innovative and kind of forward-thinking?
Well, I think those are great comments. Thank you, Alicia. I think, you know, we grow raw products. It still takes, you know, same number of days to grow an ear of corn, and you still haul it to the processing plant. And so much of what we do is just, you know, basic growing. But we've innovated. We've been very innovative in our food manufacturing. We create all of our own electricity. We brought in the first driverless tractors, first GPS satellite guided systems. We've been on the front end of a lot of technology. And there's so much more to go. But I think that the point made here is, you know, if we ordered new trucks today, they wouldn't take our order. If we weren't a fleet, we couldn't even order new trucks because of the chips and isn't there. If we ordered new tractors, the same tractors we ordered 7 years ago, rather than 140,000 each, they'd be 400,000 each. You know, we're just in a time frame where we know the technology. We know exactly what technology we want. That's not the secret. We know exactly where to go get it. Most of it's in Germany. You always go to the German farm show to get technology that's 10 years ahead of you. And we're not even short on capital. Yeah. The question is do you re-engineer that processing and manufacturing environment in this business environment? And to me, that's the crux of the question. I grew up in Sherman County with these German farmers that have been up there 135 years. And one thing I learned, and I've employed it my entire business career, is you never take on more leverage than you can handle in your worst year. And I think all of us as business people would be very thoughtful to think about that right now because, you know, it's unknown times, and it's not like we don't know where to go or what we'd like to do. It's making sure our business environment is there to back up, that we know we can generate those margins and profits, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now in this environment.
I have one more quick thought about that, just building off what you said. If anybody doesn't know what technology they need or what capital investments they need to invest in to get their business to the next level, I want to do a little plug for the Oregon Manufacturing Extension Partnership, OMEP. They have great services to help you figure out what makes sense for your business. But I echo Carla, I don't think the problem is that we don't know that we need to do this. It's the capital problem. How can we afford it?
Well, and you talk about the capital problem. and we talk about economic development, you know, Seth, you mentioned with the incentive programs that a lot of them are based on job creation. And yet, if you're trying to create more efficiencies with digital transformation, how is that helping or not?
Well, you know, sometimes people say they appreciate the comments and they don't have anything to add, but then they add a bunch of stuff. But I think they're spot on here. I don't really have a lot to add to this, to be honest. I really do think there's an opportunity to look at the value of retention and the cost of doing so. And I just reiterate that one more time.
Well, before we wrap up, are there any additional insights any of you would like to share?
I have two. Senator Wyden talked earlier about wildfire. And I just want to reiterate with our audience, you know, we have 62 million acres in Oregon. 30 million of those acres are in forest. We have burned over 4 million acres in the last 6 years, and over 85% of that has been on our public lands. The Wildfire Council said we need $4 billion over 20 years, and we need to treat 5.7 million high-risk acres. The Nature Conservancy and Sustainable Northwest are, you know, if you look at what they did on the bootleg fire, those acres that were treated came out remarkably better than the acres that weren't. And I just hope we can come together as Oregonians for our own health risk, smoke mitigation. We really have to deal with these forests that haven't been, you know, really managed for 40 years. My last thought is, you know, what we learned in the pandemic. What we learned is we need our food sources closer. The East Coast sources, the food coming, you know, offshore didn't get here, that didn't get to the supermarkets in a timely manner. We were shipping trucks in the middle of the night to local supply to keep food on the shelves. Medicine, we need to up our pharmaceutical game and not be reliant. We need to increase our capacity, you know, in the US. Chips today, we can't get trucks, we can't get much of what we know we need because we can't get the chips. I was thrilled that, you know, Texas is really increasing capacity on chips. I think we just need to think about critical manufacturing in the US and be really thoughtful about our own needs and, you know, being sure that we have really critical needs met for our own populations. Thank you, Karen.
Alicia?
I think I've said enough.
And Seth?
I'll say one thing, Karen. Working in economic development is unique because we get an insight into the personalities and businesses in our community day in and day out. And it pains me a bit to sometimes feel like there might be a perception, probably not in this room, but in our community, that business owners and businesses aren't wholly dedicated to their employees and the communities in which they reside. And it is a humbling and inspiring place to be in where I get to, again, day in and day out, see these really incredible people who are problem solving, sticky problems every day, not so much so they do well all the time, but so their employees do well and succeed and so their communities thrive. And I like to clap like every day for these businesses that I get to see. It's a really remarkable and humbling thing, and I think we should all be proud at the dedication that they have in our state to making this a really vibrant and great place to live and work.
Thanks, Seth. Great comments. Thank you. Well, I just want to thank you all for a great discussion. You've been a great panel. And now we're going to take a look at another quick video on Oregon manufacturing before the next break.
So ESS, we make large-scale, grid-scale energy storage systems based on a technology we have developed. It's called iron flow batteries.
If the solar field is going to oversupply electricity, the battery can store that low-cost, sustainable, clean energy. So our facility here in Wilsonville, Oregon, we now have automation lines in place. We can do around 250 megawatt hours of production capacity per year.
There are certainly moments to be like, oh my God, what are we doing? We quit jobs, we don't have an income, but we did not get to where we are without supports. Our first grant, we actually got it is from ONAMI. So that's the Oregon Nanoscience and Microscopy Institute. They validated that, hey, we could possibly try this. Can we fundamentally design something based on an environmentally friendly, earth-abundant material?
And if we're going to put large amounts of batteries on the grid, firming up clean energy, we want to do that with a clean technology as well.
But one of the issues that we saw with the fuel cell technologies is that in order for the technology to work, it required precious metal catalysts.
Those need to be mined to get them. They're not the most environmentally friendly methods to get those materials.
If the market is really so big, and if we are going to really deploy so many batteries around the world to do this job, it has to be earth-abundant materials.
What we do, our active material is iron, and then our supporting electrolyte is basically salt water. When we first started ESS back in 2011, everybody thought we were crazy.
We started in Craig's garage, actually.
And I think the only real reason we've been successful here is because we promote failure. Go out into the lab, get your hands dirty, figure out how it's going to work, figure out how it doesn't work. But to get that, a lot of capital in the organization, we need to have deployments in the field. And what really helped us do that is our grant with the Department of Energy, ARP-E.
Then we were able to rent out a lot more office space and a lot more lab space. We actually start having our own lab space in PSBA.
And now we need to figure out how to scale it into manufacturing. And that's what we're doing now.
Right now we have probably 180 people. So as a company grow, we're able to bring more talents for sure.
The market is just growing so quickly. It's very good news for us, yeah.